we're talking about the church of Ephesus, and we talked about the commendations, those things that God said they were doing right, and then we had the condemnations, which God said they were doing wrong. But then he says, what I want to do is I want to tell you about a conqueror's reward. And that is in Revelation chapter 2:7.
He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches.
To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God.
So the last thing that God says through John to the church is, I've got a reward for you. If you'll change all this stuff and do right, I've got a reward for you. So we looked at Ephesus, the church that hated sin but couldn't love people. Now we move to Smyrna. Smyrna, the church that loved Christ more than life. Now, it's interesting that the church of Smyrna in Revelation 2:8-11, and we'll talk about that. Now, Smyrna was a persecuted church. It had actually no condemnations. You know, all the other churches seem to have condemnations, but this one did not have a condemnation. And so the Bible says that because of their persecution, because of their willing to die, you can't go any farther than that. And so the name Smyrna means crushed. The only way to get a fragrance of a rose is to crush it. The Romans tried to crush the Smyrna church, but it only sent a glorious scent to the Lord. Polycarp, John's disciple, was burned at the stake there, and his words rang out. Let me quote what he said. I have served the Lord for over 80 years, and I will not deny him. Light the fire to the glory of God. Man, I tell you what, that fired those people up. They said, hey, listen, we're ready to sacrifice too. Polycarp was a founding father, an early church father, and because of that, we understand sacrifice. Revival today is coming from persecution, not prosperity. Martyrdom is the wind that spreads the truth and spreads the gospel and spreads the sacrifice for people and spreads the spark of revival. See, the reasons why they were persecuted is because, one, they were evangelistic. Not to compromise, they would be persecuted. A, they condemned the homosexual and immoral lifestyle of the Romans. They didn't like that. They would not confess Caesar as Lord. They didn't like that. They would confront the idol worshipers, and they really didn't like that. So what they would do is, as soon as they conquered someplace, they got their gods and said, okay, we're just going to add that god to it. The second reason why they were persecuted is they were bad for the idol industry. You see, in Acts chapter 19, it tells a story about Paul. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Diana, brought no small profit to the craftsmen. He called them together with the workers of a similar occupation and said, men, you know that we have our prosperity by this trade. Moreover, you see and hear that not only Ephesus, but throughout all Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away many people, saying that they are not gods which are made with hands. So he said, man, I tell you what, we're in trouble because this guy Paul, he's preaching and people are not buying our idols and, we're making the money. A lot of people say all these preachers, all they talk about is money, money, money. But I tell you what, the devil's crowd never has a financial problem. So let's look at the third thing. They were blamed for all the problems. When a drought, they blamed Elijah and they blamed the Christians. Remember when Ahab came and said to Elijah, he said, you are the man. And Elijah said, no, you're the man. You're the reason why all this drought is happening. So the Christians in Smyrna were blamed for the drought. When there was a flood, they were blamed for the flood. When they lost a battle, they were blamed. You made the gods and goddesses of war angry, so that's the reason why we lost our battles. Well, persecution is the wind that spreads the spark of revival. In America, we cannot get people to live for Christ, yet in persecuted areas, people are willing to die for Christ. I mean, you stop and think about that. There are people today who know, without a doubt, if they're found reading the Bible, they're going to be put to death. And yet many Christians don't even read the Bible. You know, we're in a situation today where it's so easy for us to live our Christian faith, but in many of these countries, it's not that easy to live a Christian faith. As a matter of fact, CBN News reported in this article, Christian leaders prepare for coming persecution and revival in the church. And in that article, it says this: God is awakening, and He is bringing revival. We are in revival in many places. We may not recognize it, but it means literally millions are getting saved. Millions in Iran. There's a huge move of God in Iran right now. I mean, we're talking to people boots on the ground. It's very exciting time to live. So keep your eyes on the prize, not the problem. Now you stop and think about that. These people are dying and revival is breaking out. They know that if they're caught with their cell phone and they've got some kind of app for the Bible, the Taliban will kill them. You see, police are burning churches in central India. China, Christian couple jailed and penniless for selling the Bible. India, Hindu authorities shut down churches following complaints about conversions to Christianity. As a matter of fact, I want to stop here and tell you something I just heard the other day. I was with a missionary friend of mine, and he does mission work in China. Now, China now has the digital yuan, which means they have digital money. And the government is controlling all the money. Everybody's money is under the government's control. And they give you what they think you need to have. And so this missionary told me that one of his people in the church was making $65 a month from the government. Well, one month he didn't quite have to use all of it. He only used $45. Well, the next month his check was $45. And so he said, listen, it's supposed to be 65. No, you can live off 45. But here's the thing that I thought was very interesting. The missionary told me that when the government is issuing every dollar or wand, if you will, they control where it goes and what it's used for, and you cannot use money for illegal acts. Well, surely that's good because they'll stop drug dealing, they'll stop money laundering, they'll stop all. That sounds good, but can I tell you where it really goes? Where it really goes is that if the church is deemed illegal, now if you're a church that's sanctioned by the Chinese government, you're all right, but if it's not, you cannot give money to the church. And again, everything's done through transactions digitally. It's not done. I can't pass a $100 bill or $50 bill on the table to the church. Everything is done through this digital. And when we get into Revelation chapter 13, we'll talk about the mark of the beast and how hard it's going to be, but that's already being set up today. U.S. urged to add Nigeria as a country of particular concern after killing Christians. Here's another one. Sudan courts order destruction of evangelical church buildings. China introduces a new financial regulation in clampdown on churches. That's what I was just talking about. Nigeria, Islamic State releases video showing execution of 20 Christians. Nigeria, armed police stood by as a Christian student was murdered, stoned to death by Muslims. You know, I watched a video some time ago. I took a course on Islam, and the professor was former Muslim, and he was showing a video of how they stone people. What they do is they put a sack over their heads so they can't see anything. And then they dig a big hole and they put them in the hole. And so these people cannot see when the rocks are coming, but as soon as they are put in the hole, They don't know when it's going to happen, but all of a sudden they'll feel it, and it'll hit them, and they'll hit them, and they'll hit them until they die. And I thought it was quite unusual because you could hear muttering going on. And I asked the professor, I said, what are they saying? And he said, David, they're praying, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Folks, that's happening today. Now, Christians in America are scared to read the book of Revelation because they say, oh, I don't want to think about being persecuted or any of the bad things that are going to happen. They're already happening. And we talked about that the other day. The difference between persecution and tribulation. I do not believe that Christians are going to go through the tribulation period, but I believe they're going through the persecution period. Persecution is when man unleashes his wrath on man. Tribulation period will be when God unleashes his wrath on man. Let's continue. 48 churches in Canada have been burnt down or vandalized as persecution continues. And this is from internationallifenews.com. U.S. media shamefully justifies a string of Canadian church burnings, New York Post. Not only that, but we see that the Notre Dame is consumed by fire was instantly described by the joint mainstream media as an isolated happening. Why? You have to understand, over 1,000 churches have been set afire, vandalized, or subjugated to theft in France in 2018 alone. Over 80% of the desecrated places of worship in France are Christian churches. According to police reports, it is a massive scandal, according to World Net Daily. Christians are targeted. Muslims kill 9, destroy homes and property. The article goes on to say, incited by rumors of blasphemy against Islam, rampaging Muslim youth killed at least 9 Christians, burnt churches, and destroyed businesses and homes of Christians in Nigeria. And we're not saying one thing about it. The Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, reported many people also were injured or driven from their homes. CAN leaders have been pleading for state and federal authorities to do more to stop the Christian targeted wave of violence and massacre. Now we get to the commendation.
And unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, These things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive.
Jesus reminded them that he died and rose again, and because he rose again, they would live. This is the hope of the Christian martyrs today. The reason why a Christian martyr is willing to die is because they believe that Jesus not only died, but he rose from the grave. It goes on to talk about the commendation.
I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan.
Well, you know, many lost their jobs after salvation. Many lost their properties, their wealth. And that was in Smyrna. And that's what's happening today. When people in these Muslim countries become Christians, they're either put to death or they lose everything they've got in many of these countries. Jesus reminded them that he also suffered tribulation and lived in poverty. He also dealt with fake believers. Remember Judas. You know, I think about that. The Bible says in the fullness of time, Jesus Christ came. In the fullness of time. Let me tell you something. He came, he never slept in a Holiday Inn. He never rode in a car. He never flew in a jet. He walked everywhere he went. He slept on rocks. If I'm choosing, and I'm God, and I have a right to choose anytime I want to come now. I don't want to go back then. But at the chosen time, he wanted to show that you could not say, hey, listen, I'm homeless or whatever. You don't understand what I'm going through. God understands what you're going through. Everything you went through, Jesus is able to say, I've gone through as well. And Hebrews chapter 4, Verse 15, it says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who has been tempted in every way as we are, yet without sin." See, we have a high priest that has gone through all this. Remember the old song, "Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows like Jesus." Jesus understands. If you're going through a problem right now, can I tell you something? He understands that problem. We'll start back on this subject next time.